Oh, it's uh, it's time for my Friday devotional. I'm quite late on Friday today doing this because we had a lot of snow here in Nova Scotia last night, and so I woke up this morning and decided to work from home a little bit, and then came in a little later into the office and took some time to shovel out the driveway. I still use the old fashioned method of clearing the snow, which is good and healthy. So that was good. That's been my morning. I've gone through that. Anyways, as a result, didn't get to the office till later, and so now I'm later in the day with my devotional. But here we are. I hope your day is going good wherever you are in the world. I hope that you're just having a good day. At any rate, let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 4, verse 12, and that's our devotional for today. So, just a reminder: the last couple of verses of the Proverbs that we've been dealing with, verse 10 and 11 and verse 12, are all kind of one sentence. And so reading them all as a whole was really good. And I would encourage you to do that. We've been focusing one verse at a time, just to focus in on the details, but it's good to get the grand scheme, and especially in Proverbs, in this section of Proverbs, to read those three verses, but even just the whole chapter. The chapter is divided into three sections, and they flow. And I would encourage you to do that. But for our purposes today, let's read chapter 4, verse 12, and then just talk about it. It says, "When you walk, your steps will not be impeded, and if you run, you will not stumble." Now he's talking about if you listen to wisdom. So remember now, two verses ago, if you listen to wisdom, my son, if you listen to my teaching, you listen to wisdom, and you apply it to your life, then when you walk, basically a metaphor for when you live, as you live your life. When you walk, your steps will not be impeded. When you run, you will not stumble. So as life is going on and you're doing your day to day, going through life, and when you're really running, when life really gets going, you're not going to stumble. You're not going to be impeded. Wisdom will lead you along so that you can continue to walk and continue to run. And that's the idea. Wisdom helps you avoid the stumbling or the stumbling blocks. It helps you keep on your feet, as it were, metaphorically speaking. The fool, on the other hand, just rushes along in life and trips over everything and falls all the time, and his life is much worse. So that's the contrast, of course, but that's the idea. So the value of God's wisdom in our life, it basically lets you walk and live your life better. So let's go through our questions. Question number one: what does a stumbling mean? So when I talk about this idea of stumbling or being impeded, the Bible uses this idea repeatedly. The idea of a stumbling block is a very common theme in scriptures. What is that talking about? Well, it's kind of talking about the mistakes we make. Really, it's talking about when we do something or something happens in our lives and we end up falling down in life, usually because of some bad choice we've made, some decision or course of action. Basically, to use the metaphor, we take a step that's not the good step. So if you imagine walking, you're hiking along. I don't know if where you are, if you hike ever, but here in Nova Scotia, we have lots of walking trails that go through the woods. And if you think about walking through the woods, you're on a path and you're leading along. Well, there's roots that sometimes come across the path, especially the more interesting paths, in my opinion. And there may be roots across that path. And as you're walking along, you kind of have to be careful, and you have to watch where you're stepping, because a root can be a stumbling block, and you could catch your toe on it, and then it throws you off balance. And then as you try to recover your balance, you make other poor steps, or you fall right to the ground and you injure yourself or whatever. The stumbling block idea is things in life that hook us up, that we catch. Our step doesn't go where it should, and we catch up on something. So often we make a bad step, we choose badly, we get caught on the thing, and then we try to compensate for that bad step, and our life goes kind of all off the rails, or we fall right to the ground, and our life becomes, we go through some level of difficulty because of a wrong action or a bad choice that we've made, because we got caught up on something that we shouldn't have got caught up on. And so it's largely talking about bad choices. It's not always bad choices. Sometimes it's just simply being the victim of something. There is that as well. But often the stumbling block is the idea of something was placed in the path of your life and you got caught on it by choices or distraction or whatever. So with wisdom, we try we learn to avoid those things. We learn to see them for what they are, to know how to deal with them so that we can step over them or around them and not stumble on them. And that's the idea. So question two, what causes the stumbling? So we think about a stumbling block. What is that? Like, what are they? Like, how would we understand them a little deeper and how they cause us to stumble? Well, often it's an idea, some sort of an idea, like I think this or I think that. What you might have heard me refer to as axioms in our life, things that we've decided are true, or maybe a desire. And very often it's some sort of a desire that comes along. It's like, I want this or I want that, or that looks appealing, or sometimes it's a distraction, and it's something that we are not really looking at, and so the not looking at that thing, or the distraction of life, something else, causes us to get caught up when we're supposed to be focused on the goal. And we're saying, I'm pursuing the things of God, a good life, a moral life, a righteous life, whatever it is. And we're supposed to be focusing there. Well, the stumbling block is something that competes with the movement in that direction in our life. And so it could be an idea, a desire, or a distraction, or whatever that competes with that. And we get caught on it, and it tears us down. It prevents us from making progress to the righteous goal. So things that can cause those stumbling blocks can be things ourselves. We can be our own worst enemy. A stumbling block can come through our own desire, and you know, a desire for something that we shouldn't have a desire for. I don't know how else to say it. We often want things that aren't good for us. We want something that the Lord has said, that's not for you. And we get kind of caught up in, well, I think I like to have that, or I want that, or whatever it is. And we become our own worst enemy. And there's another, once again, a non-biblical proverb, but that's kind of applicable. Sometimes you'll be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Well, that kind of a thing, right? Like, it's like we in life, sometimes we wish for things that really God has said no. And we kind of get annoyed with God sometimes, like, why can't I have this? Or why can't this be the way it is? And we get caught on that, and it ends up causing us to stumble. We find our life gets really shipwrecked because, well, we're our own worst enemy sometimes. And that's one route through which sometimes the stumbling blocks of our life come. And wisdom teaches us how to be better people, so that we can say no to ourselves and align our desires properly, so that we'll actually desire the better things rather than the lesser things, or the evil things even. But stumbling blocks can also come through others. Sometimes in life, people will entice you to failure. Sadly, a lot of people are happy to see you fail. They want to see you fail. Some people find it funny when they watch other people fail, and they think there's something delightful in that. Or sometimes it's because somebody themselves they want to justify themselves, so that they like to bring someone along on their own failure. And so often stumbling blocks can come into your life because someone else places them there. And it's, ideas that are not godly, or enticing you to desires that are not godly, or to things that aren't good, or distracting you away from what matters, and helping you put wrong priorities in your life, or whatever the case it is. Often, we see this in the advertising industry quite often. They don't care about your health. They care about their product being sold, or they don't care about how your life really turns out. They care about their product being sold. And so they'll entice you into a lustful way of life, or into a gluttonous way of life, or whatever, as long as they get their products sold. And so they become a stumbling block to you. And wisdom teaches us to be on guard against things like that, so that we can see that coming and go, whoa, I'm not gonna trip up on that. I know they're making it sound like this is a great thing, but I know better. I know what God has taught me. And so you can avoid the stumbling block. And so as you walk, you're not impeded by that, or as you run, you don't trip and stumble over that in your life. But that's the value of wisdom, because without the wisdom, we will very often fall to our own vices, or to the vices being sold to us by the world. And so thank God for wisdom. So question three, is it possible to be free of stumbling blocks? Is it possible to get a life in which stumbling blocks just aren't a thing anymore? And the answer, I could be really kind of, I could be, cheeky and say, sure, in the afterlife, that's what it's like. In God's new world, it's like that. There's no stumbling blocks, sure. But in this life, the one we're living right now, Jesus said very famously, it is inevitable that stumbling blocks will come. This life has them. We're hiking through the woods, and that's what this world is. There are roots, there are stones, there are things in the way. There's even snares that Satan and humans put in the way of our life. And so it is inevitable that you will face stumbling blocks. Jesus also said, "But woe to those through whom they come." Like there is a judgment on people who put stumbling blocks in your path, including you, by the way. When you put a stumbling block in your own path, God says, "Hey, I'm not going to let you get away with that." There's a judgment that comes with that. But especially those outside, when Satan or other humans try to put things in your life to cause you to stumble for their own benefit, there's a judgment that comes on them. But that happens. And so we need to be very vigilant in our life and realize that God allows it. He'll judge them, but he allows it. So wisdom is necessary. God's wisdom is necessary so that we can be on guard as we walk our life against the stumbling blocks, because they will. Jesus says it's inevitable. They'll be there. They will be there. So we need to live with that awareness and grow in wisdom so that we can face the life we have to lead with the security of knowing how to identify and be careful to step over the roots, step around the stones, and not get caught up by them, right? So question 4, if stumbling blocks are inevitable, what hope is there? And we can feel very hopeless with what I just said. What hope is there in life if there's going to be stumbling blocks? So here's the mistake. Sometimes we think that because stumbling blocks are inevitable, we sometimes think stumbling is inevitable. But that's not the case. Jesus didn't say you will stumble. What he said is there will be things in your path that can make you stumble. But with wisdom, we can find a way to not stumble. It's not inevitable that you will fall. It's merely a matter of learning so that we don't. Now, most of us will probably fall from time to time. God will bring us up onto our feet again. God will have grace for us. But it is possible to grow in God's wisdom so that we don't fall. Peter, the apostle, says this: if you do these things, you will not stumble. In one of his letters, you can go read that later, just do a search for it. But he said, if you grow in these godly characteristics, you will never stumble. Like there is a way. God has taught us through his wisdom. There's a way to live your life so that you will, as this proverb is saying, you will walk unimpeded. And if you run, you won't stumble. The stumbling blocks will still be there, but you won't stumble because you've learned, you found the wisdom of God. You found a way and a path that teaches you, here's the righteous way. And so you can say no to your own vices. You can say no to the traps and enticements of the world and of Satan. And God can keep you from stumbling, as Paul the Apostle said in his letters, to the one who is able to keep you from stumbling, God. And so as we learn from God and as we trust God, you can live a life that the stumbling doesn't happen. Even if you're living right now and you're saying, you know what, I stumble a lot. Okay. Then you need to learn to go. You need to call out to God more and say, God, I want your wisdom more in my life. Please give me more wisdom. And he will. And you will find in time that he will raise you up to a place where you won't stumble. Or at least you'll stumble less often. And eventually, with his grace, you'll get to a point where you don't stumble anymore in the things that matter. We all trip on ice physically, but in the things that matter in life, God will get you there. You won't stumble anymore. So your question for you today is how often do you stumble? Do you find yourself stumbling a lot? And the answer to that is dig into God more. Like go to him more. Say, God, I stumble all the time. Help me, because I'm obviously not applying your wisdom enough. So help me. And he will. He really will. He doesn't want you to stumble. He loves you. So dig into God more. Dig into God more if you're finding yourself. And if you're not stumbling, then a proverb we haven't gotten to yet, but a good one is be careful when you think you won't stumble. That's when you do. Just keep vigilant. Keep vigilant. God, help us to do it. Help us to learn your wisdom so that we will not stumble. In Jesus' name. God willing, we'll see you Tuesday with verse 13. Have a great weekend.